The processing chamber smelled like disinfectant and fear. Daniel Reed sat on the metal bench, hands cuffed in front of him, watching the Centauri clerk tap at his data tablet with 4 thin fingers. The alien's skin shimmered pale blue under the harsh lights, and his eyes never once looked up at Daniel's face. "Unauthorized wildlife contact," Bryn said, his voice flat and mechanical. "Sector violation code 973. You interfered with natural planetary fauna on Talus 9. Daniel shifted on the cold bench. "I helped an injured animal. It was dying." "It was a predator. Class 4 threat rating." Bryn finally looked up, his large black eyes showing no emotion. "You endangered yourself and violated Imperial wildlife protocols. The creature should have been left to expire naturally." "It was suffering." "It was an animal." Bryn returned to his tablet. "Your psychological evaluation indicates predator-sympathetic tendencies. This is concerning behavior for a human. Your species has only been part of the Galactic Empire for 32 years. You must learn proper conduct." Daniel wanted to argue, but he'd been through enough bureaucracy to know it was pointless. The Empire had rules for everything. Compassion apparently wasn't one of them. Bryn stood up, smoothing his uniform. "You have been sentenced to 48 hours in Containment Block Omega. This will serve as reality correction therapy. When you emerge, you will understand why Imperial protocols exist." "What's in Containment Block Omega?" "Confiscated specimens, dangerous entities from across the galaxy." Bryn walked to the door and paused. "Perhaps exposure to truly deadly creatures will cure you of your delusions about savage beasts." 2 guards entered, both heavily armored Kryn with mandibles that clicked as they breathed. They hauled Daniel to his feet and pushed him down a long corridor. The walls changed from clean white to reinforced gray metal. Warning signs appeared in multiple languages. "Danger. Extreme hazard. Authorized personnel only." They stopped at a massive door with pressure seals around the edges. One guard entered a code on the panel beside it. The door hissed and began to open, revealing darkness beyond. "Good luck, human," one guard said. It didn't sound friendly. They shoved Daniel inside. The door slammed shut behind him with a boom that echoed through the enormous space. Emergency lighting flickered on, casting red shadows across the chamber. Daniel's eyes adjusted slowly. The room was huge, at least 100 meters across. The walls were reinforced durasteel, scarred with deep gouges. The floor was concrete, stained dark in places. And in the center of the chamber, 3 massive shapes moved in the shadows. Dragons. Daniel had seen pictures of void worms in the Imperial database, but images didn't capture their presence. They were reptilian, covered in scales that looked like crystalline formations. Each one was different in size, but even the smallest was larger than any Earth animal he'd encountered. The biggest dragon stepped forward into the light. Its scales were dark purple and gray, and one of its eyes was missing, replaced by scar tissue. The other eye glowed faintly yellow, fixed on Daniel with unmistakable intelligence. The creature's wings were folded against its back, and its tail swept slowly across the floor. Behind it, 2 other dragons watched. One had lighter scales, almost silver, but its left wing hung at an odd angle. Even from this distance, Daniel could see the wound festering on the wing membrane. The third dragon was smaller, younger, its ribs visible through translucent scales. All 3 wore thick collars around their necks. Red lights blinked on the devices. The scarred dragon hissed, a sound like steam escaping from a broken pipe. It took 2 steps toward Daniel, and the floor trembled slightly. Its head lowered, jaws opening to reveal rows of sharp teeth. Daniel stood very still. His heart hammered in his chest, but he controlled his breathing. Fear was natural, panic was deadly. He'd been part of Earth's Wildlife Reconnaissance Unit before humanity joined the Empire. The unit had dealt with Earth's resurrection program, when scientists brought back extinct species through genetic engineering. He'd stood 5 meters from a short-faced bear. He'd tracked terror birds through the Australian outback. He'd helped relocate a family of saber-toothed cats. The trick was never to run, never to show aggression. Read the animal's body language and respond appropriately. These weren't exactly animals, though. The way that scarred dragon looked at him suggested something more. There was calculation in that yellow eye. Assessment. Daniel slowly sat down, cross-legged on the floor. He kept his hands visible and loose. He looked away from the dragon's direct gaze, showing submission without fear. The dragon stopped advancing. Its head tilted slightly, confused by this response. Daniel began to speak, his voice low and steady. "I'm not here to hurt you. I know you don't understand my words, but maybe you'll understand my tone. I'm Daniel. I'm sorry they put me in here with you. I'm sorry for whatever they've done to you." The second dragon, the one with the injured wing, made a low, rumbling sound. It was clearly in pain. The wound on its wing looked infected, the edges of the membrane swollen and discolored. The smallest dragon pressed against the injured one, making soft chirping noises. Concern, family bonds. Daniel's mind raced. 48 hours in here. The dragons were clearly malnourished and mistreated. The guards outside probably expected him to be dead within minutes. But these creatures weren't mindless killers. They were scared, hurt, and defensive. He could work with that. The scarred dragon watched him for a long moment, then slowly backed away. It didn't turn around, keeping its good eye on Daniel at all times. It positioned itself between Daniel and the other two dragons, protective. Daniel let out a slow breath. First hurdle cleared. They weren't going to attack immediately. He looked around the chamber more carefully. There was a water dispenser in one corner, probably designed for large creatures. Food troughs sat empty near the far wall. Cameras were mounted in protective cages along the ceiling, red lights blinking. The guards were watching. Let them watch. Daniel settled his back against the wall, making himself as non-threatening as possible. He had time, 48 hours. That was enough to figure this out. The injured dragon whimpered again, and Daniel's jaw tightened. Enough time to figure out how to help them. 3 hours passed in tense silence. Daniel stayed against the wall, watching the dragons as they moved around the chamber. The scarred one never fully relaxed, always keeping watch. The injured dragon lay down near the center of the space, breathing shallow and quick. The youngest stayed close, occasionally nudging the injured one with its snout. Daniel studied their movements carefully, the way they communicated with each other through sounds and body language, the way the scarred one checked on the others regularly, the way the young one kept looking toward the empty food troughs with desperate hope. These weren't just animals. Everything about their behavior suggested complex social structure, family units, emotional bonds. The Imperial database had classified void worms as non-sentient megafauna, dangerous predators from the Ashgrave Nebula region. But Daniel had seen enough of the Empire's classifications to be skeptical. They had a habit of labeling anything inconvenient as primitive. The injured dragon's breathing grew more labored. It made a sound like broken glass scraping together, and the young one cried out in response. The scarred dragon moved closer, pressing its head against the injured one's neck. Comfort, affection. Daniel couldn't just sit here and watch anymore. He slowly got to his feet. All 3 dragons immediately focused on him. The scarred one moved between him and the others again, wings spreading slightly in warning. Daniel raised his hands, palms out. "Easy, I want to help. Your friend is sick." He pointed at the injured dragon, then at the wound on its wing. The scarred dragon's eye narrowed, but it didn't attack. Daniel began unbuttoning his outer shirt. The movement made the scarred dragon tense, but Daniel kept his motions slow and deliberate. He removed the shirt and began tearing it into strips. The young dragon tilted its head, watching with obvious curiosity. Daniel held up one of the cloth strips. He wrapped it around his own forearm, demonstrating, "Bandage for wounds, see." He unwrapped his arm and held the strip out, then gently tossed it onto the floor between himself and the dragons. It landed in neutral territory. The scarred dragon sniffed the air but didn't move. The young one crept forward, stretching its neck to investigate the cloth. It sniffed the fabric, then looked back at Daniel with what seemed like confusion. "It's clean, won't hurt." Daniel tore another strip and tossed it near the first. Over the next hour, he slowly worked his way closer. Each time he moved, he announced it. Each time he tore another piece of cloth, he showed it was harmless. The dragons watched every movement, but the aggressive posturing gradually decreased. The injured dragon's condition worsened. It tried to stand but collapsed, its wing dragging across the floor. The sound it made was pure anguish. The young one pressed against it, making desperate little chirps. The scarred dragon looked between its fallen companion and Daniel, and something shifted in its expression. It stepped aside. Daniel's breath caught. That was permission, or at least it wasn't a death threat. He moved forward slowly, cloth strips in hand. The scarred dragon shadowed him but didn't interfere. Daniel knelt beside the injured dragon, and up close, the damage was worse than he'd thought. The wing wound was deep, with burn marks around the edges. Electric prod, probably. The kind the guards carried. The infection had spread and the dragon's body temperature was dangerously high. Fever. "I'm going to touch you now," Daniel said softly. "I'll be gentle." He reached out slowly and placed his hand on the dragon's shoulder. The creature's scales were warm, almost hot. It whimpered but didn't pull away. Daniel examined the wound with careful fingers. His training came back to him. Clean the wound first. Remove debris. Apply pressure to stop any bleeding. Create a stable bandage. He moved to the water dispenser and soaked several cloth strips. The water was clean, at least. He returned to the injured dragon and began cleaning the wound. The dragon flinched and growled, but the scarred one moved closer, making a low, rumbling sound. Reassurance. The scarred dragon was telling the injured one to trust Daniel. That was remarkable. Daniel worked as gently as possible, washing away the infection and debris. The dragon's breathing steadied slightly. He used the remaining cloth to create a proper bandage, wrapping the wing membrane to support it and keep it clean. "There," he said, sitting back. "That's the best I can do without proper supplies. You need real medicine, antibiotics." The injured dragon looked at him with eyes that reflected the red emergency lighting. Then it did something that made Daniel's heart skip. It pressed its forehead against his chest, just for a moment. Gratitude. The young dragon chirped excitedly and bounded over, sniffing at Daniel's hair. It was almost playful, despite the dire circumstances. The scarred dragon approached last. It lowered its massive head until it was level with Daniel's face. They stared at each other for a long moment. Then Daniel felt something strange. A pressure in his mind, not painful but present, like someone knocking on a door inside his skull. Images flooded through him, not words but feelings and impressions, grief, loss, fear, and underneath it all a desperate, clinging hope. He saw flashes of another place, forests made of crystalline structures, skies filled with colorful nebula clouds, other dragons, dozens of them, flying through impossible beauty. Then fire, explosions, ships descending from above, dragons falling from the sky. Capture cages, pain. Daniel gasped and pulled back from the connection. The scarred dragon stepped away, watching him carefully. "You're telepathic," Daniel breathed. "Or empathic, you can share emotions, memories." The dragon made a sound, almost like acknowledgement. Daniel's mind reeled. This changed everything. These weren't animals at all. They were people, sentient beings with culture, history, civilization. And the Empire had destroyed them. He looked at the cameras watching from above. The guards thought they were observing a human being terrorized by monsters. They had no idea what was really happening here. Daniel stood up and walked to the center of the chamber, directly under the main camera. He looked straight into the lens. "These are sentient beings," he said clearly. "They communicate. They have language, culture, and intelligence. The injured one needs medical care immediately. If you don't provide it, I'll file formal charges under the Galactic Rights Convention, Article 12, Protection of Sentient Species." He waited, but there was no response from outside. Daniel turned back to the dragons. The scarred one was watching him with what he could only describe as respect. "We're going to get you out of this," Daniel promised. "All three of you. I don't know how yet, but we will." The young dragon curled up next to him, exhausted. The injured one's breathing had stabilized slightly, the bandage helping. The scarred one settled into a protective position, but for the first time, it closed its good eye. They trusted him now. Daniel sat with his back against the scarred dragon's side, feeling the rise and fall of its breathing. His military implant was still active. The distress beacon would activate automatically if his vitals dropped too far or if chemical attacks were detected. But for now, they had to wait and hope someone was listening. Somewhere in the facility's administrative section, alarms were screaming. Administrator Cullen stared at the monitor displaying Daniel's statement, his scaled hands gripping the edge of his desk. The Vorsh administrator's orange eyes narrowed to slits. "That human just accused us of violating sentience protocols," his assistant said nervously. "If he files that formal complaint—" "He won't have the chance." Cullen punched the intercom. "Security Chief Harrick initiates specimen termination. Containment Block Omega. Authorization Code 77 Alpha." "Sir, the human witness will be listed as a casualty of aggressive fauna behavior. Tragic but predictable given his mental instability." Cullen's voice was ice cold. "We have 3 void worm specimens scheduled for execution anyway. We're simply moving up the timeline. No one will question it." In the control room, Chief Harrick hesitated. His 4 hands hovered over the execution protocols. He looked at the monitor showing the human sitting peacefully among the 3 dragons. "Sir, the footage shows no aggressive behavior from the specimens. The human appears to have established rapport." "Did I ask for your analysis, Chief?" Cullen's voice crackled through the speaker. "Execute the order, now, before that human's complaint reaches the Oversight Committee." Harrick's fingers moved to the gas release controls. He'd been in the Imperial military for 20 years. He followed orders. That's what soldiers did. He activated the sequence. In Containment Block Omega, Daniel was teaching the young dragon a simple gesture game when he smelled it. Sweet and cloying. Chemical. His military training identified it instantly. "Sedative gas, military grade." "No," he hissed, jumping to his feet. The dragons looked at him in confusion, then began to smell it too. The scarred one snarled, recognizing danger. Daniel ran to the water dispenser and soaked the remaining pieces of his undershirt. His hands shook as he worked. Too little cloth, too many targets. Here, he pressed a wet cloth to the young dragon's snout. "Breathe through this, filter the gas." The young one didn't understand, but it copied Daniel's actions when he demonstrated on himself. The scarred dragon caught on quickly, taking a cloth strip and pressing it to the injured dragon's face. Daniel wrapped his own face, breathing through the damp fabric. It would help, but not for long. The gas was already thick in the air, making his vision blur at the edges. The injured dragon was in the worst position. Already weakened by fever and infection, the sedative hit it hard. Its legs buckled. "Stay awake," Daniel urged, supporting its weight. The dragon was massive. He couldn't hold it up for long. The young dragon swayed, its eyes unfocused. It collapsed with a whimper. The scarred dragon fought to stay conscious, but even its massive frame couldn't resist the concentrated dose. It looked at Daniel with its one good eye, and through the psychic connection, Daniel felt its emotion. Rage, not at him, but at the facility, the Empire, the cruelty of being murdered after everything they'd survived. And under that rage, bone-deep exhaustion, the desire to finally rest, even if it meant death. "Don't give up," Daniel gasped. His own knees were weakening. "Please, someone's coming, they have to be." But no one was coming. He was a nobody, a human veteran arrested for a minor violation. The Empire wouldn't care. Unless Daniel's military implant. It monitored his vitals constantly. Chemical attack would trigger an automatic distress beacon. But had it? How long did it take to activate? His vision tunneled. He dragged himself and the smallest dragon toward the air vent, where the gas was slightly less concentrated. The young dragon's breathing was shallow but steady. Daniel collapsed beside it, his strength gone. The wet cloth slipped from his face. He couldn't lift his arms to replace it. Through blurring consciousness, he saw the scarred dragon crawl toward them. It positioned itself as a shield, even now trying to protect them all. Family, Daniel thought. That's what they were. A broken family holding together against impossible odds. His eyes closed. The distress beacon had activated 13 minutes ago. It broadcast on emergency military channels, complete with Daniel's biometric data, location, and the chemical composition of the gas in his lungs. Earth's diplomatic corps received it first. Retired veteran under chemical attack in Imperial custody. Potentially lethal situation. Protocol demanded immediate investigation. But it was the attached data that made Ambassador Cole reach for the priority communication line. References to sentient species classification. Illegal detention. Evidence destruction. "Get me the Emperor's Oversight Council," Cole barked at her assistant. "Now, and pull every treaty violation file we have on the Empire. I want ammunition." The call connected in 40 seconds. Cole didn't waste time on pleasantries. "We have a human citizen under chemical attack in Imperial Detention Center 7. The facility is attempting to destroy evidence of potential genocide. You have 10 minutes to deploy neutral investigators before I invoke Section 9 of the Alliance Treaty and deploy Earth military assets." The council representative sputtered. "Ambassador, you can't possibly." 9 minutes 30 seconds now, your move." The threat of Earth military intervention was enough. For all their bluster, the Empire knew humanity's military was nothing to dismiss lightly. Humans were creative, ruthless, and had already proven themselves in 3 separate border conflicts. The Council contacted Emperor Thalen directly. Thalen was in a strategic planning session when the emergency call came through. He listened to the situation report with increasing anger. A human veteran, dragons classified as non-sentient, chemical execution to hide evidence. His voice could have frozen stars. Which imbecile authorized this disaster? "Administrator Cullen at Detention Center 7, Your Eminence. Send my personal investigation team, immediately, full authority to override all facility personnel." Thalen stood, his robe sweeping across the floor. "And inform Cullen that if that human dies, I will personally ensure he shares the same fate." The Emperor's agents moved like a surgical strike. 3 ships dropped out of quantum space above the detention center 27 minutes after Daniel's beacon activated. Lead Agent Iris Navarro coordinated from the command ship. "Breach team, you have authorization to use lethal force if facility personnel resist. Medical team, prepare for multiple casualties. Science team, preserve all evidence." The breach was textbook perfect. Armored agents stormed through the facility's main entrance, while others teleported directly to key locations. Facility guards didn't even attempt resistance when they saw the Emperor's seal. Harrick tried to purge the video evidence, but the agent's tech specialist froze his systems remotely. "Hands where I can see them, Chief," the specialist said pleasantly. Everything you just tried to delete has been copied to our secured servers. In the administrative section, Cullen attempted to flee through a maintenance corridor. He ran directly into Agent Navarro. "Going somewhere, Administrator," she smiled without warmth. "You're under arrest for attempted murder of a protected citizen and conspiracy to commit genocide." The gas chamber was neutralized in seconds. The door blew open, and environmental-suited agents rushed inside. They found Daniel unconscious, curled around the smallest dragon. All 3 dragons were barely breathing. "Medical now," Navarro shouted. The team worked with efficient precision. Oxygen masks, stimulants, biomonitors attached to both human and dragons. Daniel's pulse was thready but present. The dragon's vital signs were all dangerously low. "Uploading their physiology data to medical database," one agent reported. "Synthesizing counteragents for the sedative. They need it fast or we'll lose them." Navarro knelt beside Daniel and gently removed his makeshift mask. "You did good, soldier. We've got you now." She looked at how Daniel and the dragons were positioned. Even unconscious, they were trying to protect each other. "Get all 4 of them to medical," she ordered. "And I want every piece of data this facility has on those dragons. Every test, every recording, every classification document." As they carefully loaded Daniel onto a stretcher, his hand reached out reflexively, grasping at empty air. The smallest dragon made a distressed sound, trying to follow despite sedation. "Keep them together," Navarro decided. "Set up the medical bay to accommodate all of them in the same space." One of her subordinates looked surprised. "Ma'am, protocol for dangerous fauna." "Did those creatures look dangerous to you?" Navarro's voice was sharp. "They looked like a family under attack. Now move." 32 minutes after Daniel had been locked in that chamber, the Emperor's agents had taken control of the entire facility. And the evidence they found would shake the Empire to its foundations. Daniel woke to the sound of medical equipment beeping. His lungs felt like he'd swallowed broken glass and his head pounded. But he was alive. He opened his eyes to find a woman sitting beside his bed. Dark skin, sharp eyes, wearing the uniform of Imperial oversight. The seal on her shoulder marked her as one of the Emperor's personal agents. "Welcome back, Mr. Reed," she said. "I'm Agent Navarro. How do you feel?" Like I got gassed, his voice came out rough. "The dragons." "Alive, all 3, in critical care but stable." She gestured to a monitor on the wall. It showed 3 different medical bays, each containing a dragon hooked up to various equipment. "They're asking for you. Well, the conscious one is. Makes a lot of noise when you're not visible." Daniel tried to sit up. Pain lanced through his chest, but he pushed through it. "Easy," Navarro said, but she didn't stop him. "You've got chemical burns in your respiratory system. Another few minutes and you'd have died." "I need to see them." "You need to give me a statement first." She pulled out a recording device. "Everything that happened from the moment you were arrested. Don't leave anything out. This recording has legal protection under Imperial law. Whatever you say is admissible as evidence." Daniel told her everything. His arrest on Talus 9, Bryn's cold processing, being thrown into the containment chamber. The dragon's intelligence, their telepathy, their shared memories of a destroyed homeworld. Navarro's expression grew darker as he spoke. "They showed me what happened," Daniel said. "The Empire knew. Before they attacked the Ashgrave Nebula, they knew the void worms were sentient. But there were rare minerals in the nebula, crystal formations worth billions. So they classified the dragons as animals and took what they wanted." "Can you prove the telepathic communication?" "The scarred one, Rathnal, that's its name, or as close as I can pronounce it. It can share memories, images, emotions." Daniel looked at her directly. "Agent Navarro, they have written language, art, philosophy. They had a civilization for thousands of years before the Empire destroyed it in 3 days." Navarro was quiet for a long moment. Then she stood and opened the door. "Bring in the evidence files, all of them." Another agent wheeled in a cart loaded with data tablets. Navarro selected one and handed it to Daniel. "Security footage from the containment block. Watch." Daniel watched himself enter the chamber, watched the tense first hours, watched himself treat the injured dragon's wound, and then, near the end of the footage, something remarkable. The scarred dragon had scratched something into the dusty floor. Symbols, flowing script that definitely wasn't random marks. "We had linguists analyze it," Navarro said quietly. "It's a written language, complex grammar. The dragon wrote 'protect young ones, trust strange one.'" She switched tablets. "And this is from the facility's research files, the ones Administrator Cullen tried to delete." The document was clinical and horrifying. Void worm intelligence tests showing problem-solving abilities exceeding most imperial species. Communication studies proving linguistic capability. Behavioral analysis demonstrating complex social structures. All stamped with classification override, non-sentient, and signed by multiple imperial officials. "They knew," Daniel whispered. "They knew," Navarro confirmed. "The mining corporations bribed classification officials. Genocide was more profitable than negotiation. And when your 3 survivors were captured, they became test subjects. The Empire wanted to see if void worms could be weaponized." She showed him more files. Horrible details about electric prods, starvation conditioning, combat readiness trials. The dragons had been tortured systematically. "How many?" Daniel asked. "How many what? How many dragons did they kill?" Navarro's jaw tightened. Estimated population before Imperial contact was between 800 and 1,000. Current survivors, 3. Daniel's hands clenched into fists. The tablet screen cracked under the pressure. "Your 3 are the only ones left," Navarro continued. "The facility was supposed to execute them in 72 hours. Your intervention delayed that. Then you forced our hand by invoking sentience protocols. What happens now? Legally, this is the biggest scandal in Imperial history. We have documented genocide, falsified classifications, conspiracy at the highest levels. Emperor Thalen is personally overseeing the investigation." She paused. "Politically, the Empire is in crisis. Multiple member species are demanding reviews of their own classification status. Some are threatening to secede." Daniel didn't care about politics. "What happens to Rathnal, Seraphine, and Myra?" Navarro raised an eyebrow. "You learned their names." "They told me through the psychic connection." He met her eyes. "Their people, Agent Navarro, they've lost everything. Their entire species, their homeworld, their culture. What happens to them now?" "That's complicated. Their homeworld is gone, completely strip-mined. There's nowhere to return them to." She hesitated. "The Empire is offering to relocate them to a protected preserve world." "Which means a cage with better scenery." "Essentially, yes." Daniel stood up, ignoring the pain in his lungs. "No, they deserve better than that." "Mr. Reed, there are limited options." "Earth," Daniel interrupted. "Send them to Earth. We have experience with endangered species rehabilitation. We've brought back dozens of extinct animals. We know how to help survivors of trauma." Navarro considered this. Earth would accept 3 alien refugees. "We'd better, I'm going to make sure of it." Daniel started toward the door. "Where are they?" "Medical Bay 3, but you're not cleared." He was already moving. His legs were unsteady, but determination carried him down the corridor. Guards stepped aside when they saw his expression. Medical Bay 3 was behind a reinforced door. Through the transparent section, Daniel could see Seraphine lying on a specialized bed, her wing carefully splinted and bandaged properly now. Medical staff moved around her, monitoring equipment. The door opened. Seraphine's head turned immediately, and she made a sound like wind chimes in a storm. Daniel felt the psychic connection slam back into place. Relief, joy, concern. He crossed to her side and placed his hand on her neck. "I'm okay. We're all okay." More impressions flooded through. Gratitude, confusion about the medical equipment, fear that this was temporary safety before another attack. "It's over," Daniel said firmly. "The people who hurt you are arrested. Emperor's orders. You're protected now." A medical technician approached nervously. "Sir, the creature is becoming agitated." "She's not a creature. Her name is Seraphine. And she's agitated because she's worried about me." Daniel looked at the technician. "Where are the others?" "Bay 4 and Bay 5. The large one, Rathnell keeps trying to break through the wall to reach this one. The young one won't stop crying." Daniel turned to Navarro, who had followed him. "They need to be together. They're family. Separating them is cruel." Navarro studied the dragon, then Daniel. "You really bonded with them." "Wouldn't you, after everything they've been through?" Daniel's voice was hard. 32 minutes. That's all it took to see they were people. How did trained researchers miss it for months? "They didn't miss it. They ignored it." Navarro pulled out her communicator. "Medical team, prepare to consolidate all 3 void worm patients into Bay 7. Yes, the large containment area, and remove the security measures. They're not prisoners anymore." Within an hour, all 3 dragons were moved to a shared space. Rathnell immediately positioned itself between the others and the medical staff, protective despite obvious weakness. Myra curled up against Seraphine, making soft sounds of relief. Seraphine's fever had broken, the infection finally responding to proper treatment. Daniel sat with them, one hand on Myra's head while Rathnell watched him with its good eye. Through their bond, he felt their question, "What happens to us?" "I'm going to take you somewhere safe," he promised. "A place called Earth. It's my home. It can be yours too if you want." Rathnell shared an image. 3 dragons alone in an alien world. No others of their kind. No home to return to. "You won't be alone," Daniel said softly. "You'll have each other, and you'll have me. I know it's not the same as what you lost. Nothing ever will be, but it's a future. A chance to live, not just survive." Myra projected a feeling, hope mixed with terror of being hurt again. "I know you're scared. You have every right to be." Daniel looked at each of them. "But I swear I'll protect you, all of you. That's what family does." Rathnell lowered its massive head and pressed it gently against Daniel's chest. The gesture was trust, acceptance. Seraphine made a sound like a distant song. Myra chirped and nuzzled closer. Agent Navarro watched from the doorway. She'd seen a lot in her career, but this was something different. Something that gave her hope the Empire might actually change. She opened a communication channel. "Ambassador Cole, Agent Navarro, I have a request from the Dragon's primary witness. He wants them granted asylum on Earth." The hearing chamber was packed. Representatives from 40 different species filled the seats, all watching Emperor Thalen at the central podium. Screens displayed the evidence collected from Detention Center 7, videos of Daniel with the dragons, research files proving intentional classification fraud, financial records showing corporate bribes. Daniel sat in the witness section with Agent Navarro beside him. Across the room, Administrator Cullen and Clerk Bryn stood in restraints, flanked by guards. Thalen's voice carried across the chamber. "The evidence is irrefutable. Imperial officials knowingly falsified sentience classifications to enable the destruction of the Void Worm civilization. Approximately 900 sentient beings were killed for mineral extraction. This is genocide." Murmurs spread through the crowd. Several species representatives stood, demanding answers about their own classifications. "All classification records will be reviewed," Thalen continued. "Independent committees will reassess every species currently designated as non-sentient. Those found to have been misclassified will receive full legal protection and reparations. A Kryn ambassador stood. What of the survivors, the three void worms? That decision rests with them. Thalen gestured to a screen showing the medical bay where Rathnal, Seraphine, and Myra rested. They have been offered sanctuary on multiple worlds. However, they have expressed preference for asylum on Earth. The chamber erupted in discussion. Earth was still relatively new to the Empire, only 32 years as a member species. The idea of them taking responsibility for survivors of imperial genocide was unusual. Ambassador Cole stood from the Earth delegation section. Earth formally accepts the asylum request. We have extensive experience in species preservation and rehabilitation. The void worms will be granted full citizenship rights and protection under Earth law. This is highly irregular, a Centauri official protested. Earth doesn't have the resources. We have the resources and the will, Cole interrupted. What we don't have is a history of classifying sentient beings as animals for profit. Perhaps that makes us uniquely qualified. The rebuke silenced the chamber. Thalen nodded slowly. The void worm survivors will be transported to Earth under Imperial escort. Reparations totaling 200 billion credits will be paid to Earth for their care and resettlement. Additionally, Mr. Daniel Reed is hereby cleared of all charges and recognized as a protected witness. Daniel barely heard the rest of the proceedings. His mind was on the medical bay, on three traumatized survivors who had chosen to trust him with their future. After the hearing, Navarro walked with him back to the medical facility. You'll need to stay on as their primary liaison, at least until they're settled. I wasn't planning on leaving them. Good, because Earth's diplomatic corps wants to offer you a position. First, xenofauna specialist. You'd be responsible for assessing and protecting non-human sentient species. Daniel stopped walking. That's a real job. It is now. You proved there's a need for it. She smiled slightly. Someone who can look past appearances and see people, who can bridge the gap between species. Earth wants that talent working officially. What about Rathnal, Seraphine, and Myra? They'd be part of your first assignment. Get them safely to Earth and help them adjust. Navarro handed him a data tablet. These are the preliminary plans for their habitat. Earth's Wildlife Integration Division has been working on it. Daniel reviewed the designs. A massive enclosure in New Zealand, mixing recreated nebula environments with Earth ecosystems. Space to fly, to rest, to live. Not a cage, but a home. It's good, he said quietly, but they'll need more than space. They need purpose, something to live for, not just survive. What do you suggest? Let them help. There are probably other species out there that were misclassified, other civilizations destroyed. The dragons could identify signs of sentience that Empire assessors missed. Prevent this from happening again. Navarro considered this. That's actually brilliant. Turn survivors into advocates. Give them agency in their own recovery. They deserve that much. They reached the medical bay to find Dr. Amara Singh, Earth's lead xenobiologist, already there. She was carefully scanning Seraphine's healing wing while the dragon watched with cautious interest. Remarkable physiology, Singh said without looking up. The wing membrane is regenerating faster than expected. Their biology incorporates crystalline structures at the cellular level. I've never seen anything like it. Rathnal made a low rumbling sound, and Singh immediately stepped back, hands raised. It's okay, Daniel said, entering the bay. Rathnal relaxed at his voice. This is Dr. Singh. She's going to help take care of you on Earth. Singh looked at Daniel with obvious respect. You really can communicate with them. They communicate, I just listen. He placed his hand on Rathnal's scarred head. How long until they can travel? Seraphine needs another week for the wing to stabilize. The young one, Myra, is recovering quickly but was severely malnourished. Rathnal's old injuries have complications but nothing life-threatening. Singh made notes on her tablet. 2 weeks minimum, 3 to be safe. The time passed slowly. Daniel stayed with the dragons constantly, learning more of their language and culture through psychic sharing. They taught him about void worm history, their philosophy of harmony between individual and collective, their art forms that combined crystal resonance with nebula energy. In return, he told them about Earth, showed them images of mountains and oceans, forests and cities, explained human history with all its triumphs and failures. Rathnal was fascinated by Earth's preservation efforts, the resurrection of extinct species, the protection of endangered animals, the idea that humans had driven species to extinction and then fought to bring them back. "We make mistakes," Daniel admitted, "but we try to fix them. That's what I want to do now, fix what the Empire broke." Seraphine shared a feeling, doubt mixed with fragile hope. Could 3 broken survivors really make a difference? "You already have. Your existence proves the Empire was wrong. Every day you survive is an act of resistance against genocide." Daniel met her intelligent eyes. "But more than that, you can help save others. Your people are gone, but other species aren't. Not yet." Myra projected determination, young but fierce. If the strange human believed they could help, then they would. Finally, departure day arrived. The transport ship was a massive Earth vessel, specially modified with a large environmental chamber for the dragons, medical equipment, monitoring systems but also comforts, soft surfaces to rest on, proper food, entertainment screens showing nebula formations from across the galaxy. The dragons boarded cautiously, still expecting betrayal despite everything. But when Daniel walked up the ramp with them, staying close, they calmed. Agent Navarro stood at the departure gate. "Take care of them, Reed, their precious cargo." "Their people," Daniel corrected gently. "But yes, I will." The journey to Earth took 3 weeks through various jump gates. Daniel used the time to continue teaching the dragons English while learning more of their language. Progress was slow but steady. Rathnal could project simple words now, though speaking physically was difficult with their anatomy. Seraphine practiced constantly, determined to master communication. Myra was the quickest learner, her young mind adapting rapidly. They watched videos about Earth obsessively, documentaries about wildlife, about cities, about human culture, trying to understand this alien world that would become their home. As they approached Earth's orbital stations, all 3 dragons pressed against the viewing port. Their first sight of the blue planet took their breath away. Daniel stood with them, one hand on Rathnal's shoulder. "Welcome home." Through their bond, he felt their response. Not quite belief, not yet, but something close, a willingness to try. The ship descended toward New Zealand's South Island. Mountains rose beneath them, snow-capped and ancient. The habitat facility waited in a valley, vast and carefully designed. Dr. Singh was already there with her team, ready to receive them. As the ship landed, Myra made a small sound of fear. Daniel knelt beside the young dragon. "I know you're scared. Change is terrifying, especially after everything you've lost." He touched his forehead to Myra's. "But you're not alone. You have Rathnal and Seraphine. You have Dr. Singh and her team. And you have me, always." The ramp lowered, revealing New Zealand's clear air and bright sun. Rathnal took the first step onto Earth soil. Seraphine followed, her healed wing folded carefully. Myra stayed close to Daniel, drawing courage from his presence. A new chapter was beginning. Not the life they'd planned, not the world they'd known, but a future nonetheless. And sometimes, survival itself was victory enough. 6 months after landing on Earth, Rathnal stood at the edge of a cliff overlooking the Pacific Ocean. The water stretched endlessly, reminding the dragon of nebula clouds but different, more solid, more real. Behind Rathnal, the habitat sprawled across the valley. artificial crystal formations grown by Earth scientists mixed with native plants, climate-controlled sections mimicking the Ashgrave Nebula's environment, but also Earth elements, trees, grass, running water. It was strange, foreign, and slowly it was becoming familiar. Seraphine glided overhead, her wing fully healed now. She developed new flying techniques to compensate for the slight weakness remaining from the injury. Watching her adapt had been inspiring. Myra was down in the valley, playing with a group of human children who visited the habitat regularly. Educational programs, Dr. Singh called them, teaching young humans about other species. Myra seemed to enjoy the attention, carefully showing them how to read void worm script scratched in the dirt. Daniel approached, carrying 2 cups of tea. He'd learned void worms could drink certain earth beverages. Rathnal had developed a taste for chamomile. "Beautiful morning," Daniel said, handing over the cup. Rathnal accepted it carefully in one clawed hand. Through their bond, the dragon projected agreement, then curiosity. There was news, Rathnal sensed. "You're getting good at reading me," Daniel smiled. "Yes, there's news. A report came in from a colony world called Bellis 3. Imperial surveyors classified some indigenous creatures as non-sentient. They're scheduled to be cleared out for agricultural development." Rathnal's grip tightened on the cup. But the local human colonists aren't so sure. They've observed complex behaviors, tool use, burial rituals, art. Daniel pulled out his tablet and showed Rathnal images of 6-legged creatures with iridescent fur. They requested an independent sentience assessment. The dragon studied the images intently, projected a question. "The Galactic Sentience Protection Initiative. Remember we talked about it?" Daniel sat down on the cliff edge, legs dangling over empty air. "Earth proposed it after what happened to your people. A team that investigates questionable classifications before species are destroyed." Rathnal made a sound like distant thunder, approval mixed with sadness. Too late for void worms, but not too late for others. "I'm leading the team, Dr. Singh, a few other specialists." Daniel paused. "We want you to come with us. You, Seraphine, and Myra if she's ready. You understand sentience in ways we never could. You'd see signs we'd miss." The dragon was quiet for a long time, watching waves crash against rocks below. Finally, Rathnal projected a memory, the Ashgrave Nebula burning, kin falling from the sky, the screams of the dying. Then another memory, Daniel sitting with them in that horrible chamber, refusing to give up, fighting to keep them breathing through the gas attack. A third memory, Earth, this cliff, this moment, the possibility of purpose beyond mere survival. Rathnal turned to Daniel and projected a single clear thought. Yes. 3 days later, the team assembled at the transport facility. Dr. Singh reviewed medical supplies. Oliver Trent, the linguist who'd helped translate void worm script, checked recording equipment. 2 other xenobiologists made final preparations. And 3 dragons waited near the boarding ramp. Seraphine had insisted on coming despite Dr. Singh's concerns about the strain of space travel on her healing wing. She'd been adamant through psychic projection. Her people were destroyed because no one investigated properly. She wouldn't let that happen to others. Myra was more uncertain. The young dragon stayed close to Rathnal, projecting nervousness, but also determination. The human children at the habitat had helped Myra understand how important this work was. "Everyone ready?" Daniel asked, looking at his unlikely team. They boarded the ship together, humans and dragons working side by side. The journey to Bellis 3 took 2 weeks. During that time, they reviewed all available data on the indigenous species. The creatures were called Velas by the colonists, though that was just a human name. 6-legged, covered in fur that changed colors with their emotions. They lived in complex underground burrow systems. Imperial survey team spent 3 days on planet, Trent explained. observed the Velas from a distance, saw them hunting and eating, filed them as non-sentient based on primitive behavior and lack of observable technology. Rathnell snorted, a sound that might have been laughter or contempt. Yeah, Daniel agreed, because 3 days is definitely enough to understand an entire species. When they reached Bellis 3, the colonial administrator was skeptical. You brought dragons to assess local wildlife. We brought sentience experts who happen to be dragons, Daniel corrected. They understand what it's like to be misunderstood and misclassified, makes them uniquely qualified. They set up base camp near a Vela burrow system. The team worked carefully using non-invasive observation methods, cameras, audio recording, long-range scanning. The Velas noticed them immediately. Several emerged from burrows, watching the newcomers with obvious caution. Rathnell, Seraphine, and Myra approached slowly, projecting calm emotions through their telepathy. The Velas couldn't receive psychic impressions the same way, but they seemed to sense the non-threatening intent. Over the following days, a pattern emerged. The Velas weren't using visible technology because their tools were biological. They cultivated specific fungi underground that served as food, medicine, and building materials. Their social structure was complex, with different burrow groups specializing in different tasks. And they had language. Trent identified 17 distinct vocalizations combined with color changes and body postures, complex grammar, abstract concepts. On the 5th day, Seraphine made a discovery. She'd been watching a group of young Velas playing near a burrow entrance. Their game involved arranging colored stones in specific patterns. She called Daniel over and pointed with her wing. The stone arrangements weren't random. They were mathematical. The Velas were teaching their young ones about spatial relationships and counting. Education, Daniel breathed. They have formal education systems for their children. By the end of the 2nd week, the evidence was overwhelming. The Velas were absolutely sentient. They had language, culture, mathematics, agriculture, social organization, and art. The team compiled their report carefully, documented everything. Then Daniel sent it directly to the Emperor's Oversight Council with copies to Earth's government and the Galactic Senate. The response was immediate. Colonial expansion on Bellis 3 was halted. The Velas were granted protected status. Imperial officials who had signed the original non-sentient classification were suspended pending investigation. More importantly, the Vela elders requested a meeting. Rathnell, Seraphine, and Myra attended with Daniel translating through the psychic bond. The Velas couldn't speak to dragons directly, but they understood the dragons had advocated for them. The eldest Vela, her fur shimmering deep purple with gratitude, touched her forehead to Rathnell's scarred head, a gesture of respect across species. Rathnell projected a feeling to Daniel to translate. We failed to save our own people, but we can save yours. That gives meaning to our survival. The Vela elder's response, translated by Trent, was simple. You did not fail, you endure. That is victory enough. News of the successful assessment spread rapidly. Within months, 12 other species requested evaluation by the initiative. Some were confirmed sentient and granted protection. Others were truly non-sentient, and appropriate conservation measures were implemented instead. The team grew, more specialists joined, more protected witnesses who'd been misclassified themselves, a Zelkari who'd escaped corporate experimentation, a Harvath who'd survived habitat destruction. They became a voice for the voiceless across the galaxy. 2 years after that terrible day in Detention Center 7, Daniel stood in front of the Galactic Senate. Beside him stood Rathnell, Seraphine, and Myra. All 3 dragons wore translation devices now, allowing them to speak directly. The Empire is changing, Daniel said to the assembled representatives. Slowly, painfully, but changing. 57 species have been reclassified as sentient in the past 2 years. Hundreds of potential genocides prevented. Rathnal spoke next, the translator converting psychic impressions to words. My people are gone. Nothing can change that, but we honor their memory by ensuring no other species suffers the same fate. Seraphine added her voice. We are the last void worms. Our language, our culture, our history lives only in our memories now, but we share it with anyone who will listen, so that we are not forgotten. Myra, no longer the frightened youngling but a confident advocate, finished. We were victims. Now we are protectors. That is the gift humanity gave us, purpose beyond survival. The Senate voted unanimously to expand the initiative's authority and funding. That evening, Daniel and the three dragons returned to Earth, to the habitat in New Zealand that had become home. They sat together on their familiar cliff, watching the sunset paint the sky in colors reminiscent of the lost Ashgrave Nebula. Rathnal projected a question. Did Daniel regret that day in the chamber, the arrest, the gas attack, everything that followed? Daniel was quiet for a moment. If I'd walked past that injured animal on Talos 9, I wouldn't have been arrested. I'd never have met you three. The Empire might have successfully hidden the genocide. More species would have died. He looked at each dragon in turn. So no, I don't regret it. That compassion, that refusal to look away from suffering led here, to you being alive, to hundreds of other species being protected, to actually changing how the galaxy works. Seraphine leaned against him gently, careful of her weight. Myra curled up on his other side. Rathnal projected a final thought, not words but pure emotion, gratitude, love, hope. Daniel smiled and rested his hand on Rathnal's scarred head. You're welcome, but you gave me just as much. You reminded me why any of this matters. They sat together as stars began appearing in the darkening sky. 3 dragons and 1 human who'd saved each other. Proof that sometimes 32 minutes was enough time to change everything. And that compassion, even in the face of cruelty, was never weakness. It was the strongest force in the galaxy.